Now it's time to get into the most civil discourse online. That is pro wrestling viewership when two competing programs are airing at the same time. And we have the numbers from Friday. This a series of reporting today from, we have the Showbuzz Daily charts. We have Brandon Thurston, as always, The Torch, and Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter providing all angles of this Friday night war. So I want to refrain from just reciting like a million numbers here that no one is going to process. So we'll kind of go through these. So SmackDown for the 2.5 hour block did 866,000 viewers, 314,000 in 18 to 49, which would be a 0.24. Rampage from 10 till 11 did 578,000 viewers. So number one, SmackDown in overall viewers, way more than Rampage, which we assumed overall viewership would be significantly in WWE's favor, and it was. 18 to 49, a 0.24, the exact same rating WWE posted for SmackDown, and it was broken down that SmackDown did 314,000, Rampage 313,000. Now, before we get into the 30-minute block way, just that overall total, how surprised were you that the 18 to 49 number was as close as it turned out being?
I don't know if I was necessarily surprised. I think going into this weekend, that was going to be the tightest race. I think there might have been a chance, their viewerships would have, I suppose, matched, but I personally felt like it was going to be 1849 that was going to be the most competitive, and the fact that they were dead even practically is there's a lot of information I think you can take from it. I think we all maybe had our suspicions, but now actually seeing in practice, you have to look at this entire experiment and ask yourself, if you're the WWE, was this a battle worth fighting? I don't know.
The analogy to me of Friday night was this was Rocky 1, where the champion leaves with his title, but he was taken to the absolute limit by the challenger that I think they assumed was going to be greatly outmatched in WWE, throwing all of this at them with a big SmackDown. And as we said, like, if you want to just take this as a one-off, like, looking at like a scoreboard, the larger picture here was that AEW was not only competitive. We're going to get into the 30-minute head-to-head battle, which is very favorable to AEW. But in the overall 2.5 hours versus 60 minutes of AEW, they won in males 18 to 49 and adults 18 to 34. This to me is... I'm not going to overstate what Friday is, because I think that's the danger everyone's going to make of this number. But this was, here is the competitor that is right on the heels of WWE and beat them in several key categories. And in the head-to-head, won.
Yeah, in the head-to-head, yeah. Man, today was very exciting, I would say, when these numbers came out. There was certainly an air of excitement we hadn't really felt since maybe some of the first weeks of that Wednesday Night War. But you can argue perhaps the stakes were even bigger this time around because it was WWE's A show. The circumstances are very different, though, of course. It's not, on Fox. It's moving for 1 week only, or at least a couple weeks only, on a station that is slightly less, in fewer homes. But there was an air of excitement, certainly. And I think with that same air of excitement came a lot of just, oh man, I can't help it, John. I'm a fiend for these like comments. I do my best to try to stay away from Twitter, but like the moment I get in, I love reading these comments, and they're all just like,
what was the general sentiment? Ugh. Like I totally stay away from it. I don't engage in any of it.
I mean, it's just exactly the type of tribalism you would expect, like if you're for one team, you're arguing that, oh, okay, well, you're arguing, well, look how much WWE won in overall viewers, why don't older people matter? And if you're an AEW supporter, I think you point out, where they win accordingly. And, ultimately it comes down to what the advertisers care about and what the networks care about. And from my understanding, at least, it is the 18 to 49 number that is most important. But
it's what everything is ranked at. Like when we say SmackDown is number one on a Friday night, we are not going by overall viewership. If we gauged SmackDown by overall viewership among the big four networks every Friday night, they are at the bottom, if not second lowest, most Fridays. But instead, they rank usually number one, give or take whatever Shark Tank does on ABC. And typically, SmackDown is number one because we are going by that 18 to 49 number, which is exactly how these shows are measured.
Yeah. But this tribalism was actively...
It's silly. Like, you can't get involved in this stuff. And that's fans being fans. Like, that comes with the territory.
It's part of the fandom. And in this case, it was actively encouraged by Tony Khan via Twitter. I mean, you can argue, yes, WWE making the move in the first place, extending their show by a 30-minute commercial-free block was one of the first shots. But Tony Khan actively participating in encouraging and trash talking, that I think obviously did a lot to fan the flames, which perhaps was...
Did that help them? Like, you have to look at it at both sides too. Like, it invites all of that kind of ugliness, but at the same time, like, as Tony Khan has kind of like pretty much stated outright, it's that there's an audience that wants this, and this is going to raise the awareness level, even if it's a toxic level of it. Like, that is going to fan the flames of what a lot of this audience wants, is these two being cutthroat with one another.
And at the end of that, I mean, the entity that benefits from it is going to be AEW. Simply being in the conversation of being an active
the rising
competitor.
Underdog is going to, like, that's a very galvanizing story for people that they can rally behind.
And when it's time to renegotiate those TV deals, that is the end game, everybody. Like, that's what we're working towards. And you can argue, yeah, maybe Tony knows exactly what he's doing by trying to fan these flames to get people talking about these two brands in the same conversation. So by the time when it's time to renew AEW's deal, they are going to get a competitive, similar rate to what WWE will likely get. So
that's the game. That's everything is towards that next deal that will be in hopes for AEW to have some transformative deal for this company, that it's not so much like, it's not to AEW's benefit that at the end of this, WWE is perceived as being undervalued. It's the idea that AEW is that WWE is overvalued at what they're being paid, rather than AEW being undervalued now. The hope is for the best thing for the industry is AEW gets something in the ballpark of WWE, and you have two companies that are making money hand over fist. If the television industry's conclusion is, well, look what AEW is doing at $175 million over 4 years, the end result is WWE should be making a lot less. And that would be counter to every major sports rights fees that have come up. Like, the balloon is not bursting. I think WWE is going to get a sizable increase, and I think AEW is on pace. We cannot predict 3 years from now, but AEW is on pace to get something significant in above what they are at now.
I mean, the more important metric is how WWE does in comparison to other competition, not pro wrestling, and they do very well. And AEW currently is doing very well too. So I mean, it'll probably be a substantial increase for AEW, and I don't think a decrease at all for WWE. So ultimately, pro wrestling wins. Do you have any further breakdown or insight into the breakdown of these numbers, John?
Yeah, there's a few things here. So afterwards, we got the breakdown of like the actual 30-minute head-to-head portion where SmackDown was commercial-free, and Rampage, you remember, started off with the commercial-free match with CM Punk and Matt Sydal. So during that 30-minute window, SmackDown did 878,000 viewers and 285,000 in 18 to 49. Rampage doing 602,000 viewers, again, way less in overall viewers, but 328,000 in 18 to 49. So a sizable topping of them in 18 to 49. And like the Punk Sydal match, it did really well for AEW. And then you saw it go down. And a portion of that is that second quarter featured, like, you had to make up for a lot of that commercial inventory that you got rid of in the first quarter and had to make up in the second. But that was where the drop comes in the second hour, or in the second quarter. And the peak for SmackDown in both viewership and 18 to 49 was their fourth segment. So it was in the first hour, which was the segment that featured the DeVille and Baszler versus Naomi match, a Hit Row video, and Seth Rollins coming out and a Sasha Banks promo. And that's right when the first hour ended. And then you had the 9 to 10 hour.
Do you have any opinion on what AEW's YouTube buy-in show might have, if at all, contributed to?
I mean, you look at that where they hit. They were up to like 943,000 viewers at the end of the first hour. The buy-in starts and it goes down. But just looking at those live numbers, and again, I'm not an expert on YouTube's calculations and such. I just can't see how the buy-in made a gap. Like SmackDown fell like 8% in viewers when the buy-in began, and I just can't look at the buy-in with those numbers that they were doing, making that big of a dent in SmackDown.
We also, of course, had sports competition.
That's right. We also had the Major League Baseball game, and college football was going on at the same time. So this was hardly a competition-free night for either side. And I would say for SmackDown, they've run on FS1 3 times. The last one was in December, and that one was over 1 million that they did on FS1. But a year ago, comparing it to Major League Baseball, it was pretty damn close to what they did a year ago when they moved to FS1 without having to go against another wrestling product. So it was a fairly even comparison year to year going against Major League Baseball in the month of October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but to me, like the big story, in my opinion, coming out of this is the fact that this was a 30-minute commercial-free block of WWE A-list programming with their biggest stars. And, CM Punk on Rampage, I think, is a pretty big deal. And that largely went uninterrupted for 20 minutes. But it was an otherwise pretty standard edition of Rampage. And they matched.
They certainly can't say that they threw all this stuff. Like, they kept their card that they had booked. They did add the buy-in stuff, but again, I don't know how much the buy-in really made a big difference on Friday night, other than your existing audience got a kick-ass match to set up Rampage. But I would say, like, this was, I think everyone is going to now shift its focus to October 29th when SmackDown is back on FS1 with the World Series on Fox. And currently, they have Talking Smack listed in the FS1 slot from 10 to 11. Now,
1 hour instead of
for 1 hour.
hour.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 1 hour of Talking Smack. So, I mean, in theory, they can do whatever they want if they have that slot. If I'm looking at these numbers, I mean, do you see WWE at all toying with this again in 2 weeks' time?
That's a great question. I think a good question is whether or not they decided to do this half-hour head-to-head. What would we be talking about today? We would still be making comparisons between, what SmackDown does on FS1 versus what Rampage does on TNT, even if they weren't going head-to-head. The fact that they did go head-to-head in AEW 1, at least in the demo, pretty handily, just kind of creates an extra talking point. But if they don't go head-to-head, then we will actually have, just a comparison between SmackDown on FS1 versus Rampage on TNT. And either way, if results are similar, I think it can potentially be as big of a similar talking point as we are having right now between the two. And I just don't know if there's a way for like WWE to fight that battle. I think people are going to watch Rampage regardless. And people who watch SmackDown are going to watch SmackDown. They threw their biggest shots on this past Friday, and a half-hour commercial free with Roman Reigns, Brock, and Sasha and Becky. I just don't really know what type of different result they would expect if they did it again.
Yeah, and a big part of this is also like the perception that you are inviting. Like, for any entertainment television reporters that really dig into these numbers, there's a fantastic story to be told from these numbers on Friday night, and it only follows upon what we have seen. Variety just had that piece as well. Like, the story that is out there in the mainstream television world is that there is a new competitor on the block that is coming very close to WWE's top programming. And this, to me, only encourages that kind of a story. And when you're talking about the larger perception issue, that's what AEW is fighting towards. When Nick Khan was being asked about the potential of, rights fees and such. His theory after the pandemic was that the top leagues, the ones that have that existing base, they're going to do fine. It's the middle class that are going to get hurt. And if his prognostication is going to be accurate, your goal is to keep AEW as far away from becoming anything close to the brand name in professional wrestling, that it's seen as any kind of close neighbor to WWE. And in the grand scheme of things, they are in completely different worlds when it comes to financially. But in the television world, where they live and die by these numbers every week, it's becoming a very competitive race. And I think this is extra bullets in the ammunition of AEW when they are going into meetings, when they are going into speak to advertisers, and they can put this data from Friday. I think it reflects very favorably on what they can do competitively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, their competition is also in their talent pool that they can pull from as well. And in particular, of course, the 18 to 49 demo, and in particular males who are growing increasingly tired of this product that are finding a migrating home in AEW. Do you have any comment on perhaps some of the other demographics that WWE seems to be doing well in?
So from Friday, just looking at this, so we went over like 18 to 49, where SmackDown edged them out by 1,000 viewers. Women 18 to 49, and this is for the entirety of both shows. Women 18 to 49, SmackDown won. Men 18 to 49, that was won by Rampage. Adults 18 to 34, this was really interesting. Rampage beat them by 10,000 viewers. In men 18 to 34, it was dead even at 71,000 viewers. And these are all from Brandon Thurston, who tabulates these demos every single week.
And some beautiful
for
charts.
His patrons. It's an essential tool for anyone doing this kind of work. But yeah, dead heat between men 18 to 34. In women 18 to 34, Rampage actually beat SmackDown. And it's not often that we look at the female comparisons and see it in AEW's favor. Adults 18 to 34, that was a WWE win, although men was with AEW, women with SmackDown on Friday. So that's kind of some of the big breakdowns there. But it was a better performance on the female side than typical for AEW. Like they saw big increases this week, which is semi-misleading because they're also coming off their all-time low for Rampage last week. So it was a large increase over a kind of bottoming out number last week. But I would say like they overperformed what I expected, because it was a cold week that they were coming off of, and SmackDown had been loaded up. So I would say that they definitely performed higher than I anticipated going in. I did not think it was going to be as close, and AEW outright winning some of these categories.
Did you have any thoughts on this potentially scandalous story about these fast nationals?
I mean, it's been discussed. Like I've heard from people privately like about this and such, that for several weeks now the fast nationals have been coming out, and this past weekend the fast nationals came out, and it was just the overall viewership and did not include 18 to 49.
And so just to catch some of our audience up, I mean, the Fast Nationals are almost like they're like the overnight ratings.
It's kind of taking like your top, metered markets, and then you're kind of extrapolating before the final numbers are out. It's monitoring certain areas of areas before everything is tabulated.
Like almost a preview of the official
Exactly.
numbers.
It's, on election night when 60% of ridings have reported.
Projections.
And exactly. It's a projection. I have like a rule that I don't go with the fast nationals. I just wait till the final number. I just don't see this exercise of putting out a story and then you're putting updated numbers in several days later. That's just mine. That's my kind of rule of thumb with that. But this weekend, like, you just saw the overall viewership come out, and I think you can see what is at play here. Like, that reads very well to WWE. And when we talked about this on Sunday, it was like, we don't know the 18 to 49 numbers, which is, I think, going to be the greatest numbers that weight is placed upon. And we don't know as well, like how the 30 minutes performed against each other. We have a much clearer view today than just going over like overall viewership comparisons. That does not tell the story of Friday night.
No. And again, what is most important to the broadcaster and to the advertisers. But yeah, so I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom. So the insinuation that seems to be going around is that somebody out there would be leaking these fast national numbers, and for some reason this week specifically omitting the Prime demo in these leaks, and people have their suspicions of who is doing this potential leaking, but I don't know if it's something we'll ever get to the bottom of, but it is an interesting wrinkle in this story.
Which, I mean, you can look at that, but it's like from the perspective of a reporter, it's like your job is not to figure out the motivation behind why someone is giving you information. Your job is to verify that what you are reporting is accurate. There may be, of course, there's going to be times that sources come to you and they have a motivation for why a story is going to get out. It is your job to just verify that. You cannot control how the message is received, just that the message is accurate. So as long as the Fast Nationals are accurate, it is fair game. Yeah. And it's like you can't you can't be playing judge on what the motivation is to put these out. But at the same time, like you can see what games are being played. I think that's going to be part of this. Like this is two companies that are at war with one another, and there's going to be lots of tricks out there. It's
honestly a war that is fascinating. I mean, it's a war that has been going on, but it's really heating up now because we are seeing WWE take their A properties now to compete against. Well, in this case, like AEW's B property, but it's a head-to-head competition nonetheless. So we'll see what the next chapter may be.
The last thing on this, as we look at October 29th, if you are Tony Khan, how are you booking that show? Is it just business as usual? This will also be a case where you will not have the benefit of a live Rampage that night. It will be a taped edition. And how do you look at that night and not think that there is a chance that you could have SmackDown competition against you? Like, how do you book that episode? Or is Friday night a strong evidence of keep booking the show the way you're doing it and put as strong a show as you can, but don't go out of your wheelhouse just because it may be a heavier competitive night than it is right now as we're speaking?
I think if I'm Tony Khan, I'm looking at this week as, like the drip of blood in the water. And I'm going to, like, it's not going to be often, I think, where you'll be placed into these sort of head-to-head conversations with the WWE. And if your goal is to make headlines to continue to put AEW in that same conversation, I think you put your best foot forward. And now I'm not saying, like, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, like, on that show, but I think you have an elevated, higher, more, interesting than usual edition of Rampage, just to really give yourself the best chance, because whether or not they go head-to-head, we will be comparing those numbers on Monday after that.
And they did very well with CM Punk against Matt Sydal, which is not an opponent that's going to jump off the screen at people, and Ruby Soho and the Bunny as well. Like, when you look at the whole show, they were also going against a replay of SmackDown on FS1 because they replayed it immediately after. So you still did have SmackDown competition for that 10:30 to 11 spot as well on top of it. So there you go. That is a big breakdown of Friday night's viewership, and on Tuesday we'll have not just the Raw numbers, but we'll also have Dynamite from Saturday night, which I think will have a little less fanfare than Friday night's numbers.
A bit less, yeah.